Hey, this is Lex Avellino, and today I'm going to show you guys how I use Blender Megascans in my Blender workflow. This is a 3D photoscanned asset library, so it's a bunch of nature or organic exterior assets that have been photoscanned and optimized for 3D CGI. Great stuff, super high quality, and there's not a lot of people giving information about how to use this with Blender. So I want to show how I'm using these in my workflow and how you can use them to quickly get a lot more out of what you're doing a lot faster, because these are super high quality assets. They're a lot of fun to use, and I want to show you how to use them. So we're going to go over here to the library, and once you've popped onto the website megascans.se and you've created an account, you'll be able to come in here to the library and access these free assets without paying anything. And I'm going to use a couple of these as I demo so you guys can follow along. And there's 3D assets and 2D assets, and I'm going to show you kind of how to use all of these. So if you click on one of these assets, you're going to get, a little preview, and then the important part of the download settings over here. And we've got a lot of different options. I usually just download everything, but if your internet's a little slower or if you don't want to wait that long, you can just pick the albedo, which is the color, the normal, the roughness, and the specular. And I'm going to let you know, if you're not familiar with what some of these things are, or you're not familiar with the physically based rendering workflow, you might want to go watch Andrew Price's video on PBR in Blender, because I'm not going to go through that. I'm kind of going to assume you know most of that. But you'll need albedo, normal, roughness, and specular. Those are the most important ones. And then these are the models right here. You've got the high poly source, which is the original scan, and then these different levels of detail. And the lowest, the 0, has the most vertices, and 5 has the least vertices. So this one has been reduced down a lot, and this one will be a lot closer to the high poly source. Like I said, I just download everything, but I've already got them downloaded. Then it's a little bit different with the 2D assets. If you go into the download settings, you won't have the models, but you still have the same texture maps. And you can choose the resolution, 2K, 4K, 8K. So once you've downloaded those, we'll go into Blender, and I've already got these downloaded. I usually download them as the FBX, but I think you've got an OBJ option. I usually work with the LOD 0 because it's pretty manageable. So you can see this one's actually only 14,000 verts, or 29,000 tries. And then what I'm going to do, this is just part of my workflow, but I usually Control B in object mode to bring in a preview window, and I'm going to add an HDRI real quick. To me, that just makes it a lot easier to know what I'm getting and to get a good high quality preview. So I've already got this set up, plugged into an environment texture, plugged into the background shader. I've got a list of HDRIs. Go to hdrihaven.com if you need something good. Lots of great stuff there, you probably already know about it. And then we're going to add a material to this object. It already has one, but we'll just delete everything except the output. And I'm going to be using the principled shader quite a lot because it's awesome. I think, honestly, always start with the principled shader, work from there. I mean, unless you're dealing with something that's like transparent, or this is just a great place to start for a lot of diffuse objects. So we're going to go back to the tree stump. We're going to bring our albedo, and that's plugged into the base color. And already, just with the albedo plugged in, you can see how much detail you have in here and how nice it looks, because since it's a photo scan, all the geometry matches up perfectly to the texture. So it just looks fantastic so quickly. And you're going to get it to look a lot nicer. All you have to do is add the normal map, non-color data, go back in, normal, and the normals are sorted by level of detail. So remember which level of detail you used and pick that normal map. And then already you can see, like, it's just incredible how quickly you can get super fantastic results. You can see it feels like cheating because you get such great results so quickly. But we're going to do a little more. So we're going to come in and pull in the specular, and the roughness. And the roughness we can just plug into the roughness channel, and the specular into the specular channel, if that wasn't obvious enough. And sometimes, depending on the model, what I'll do, you might want to bump up the normal a little bit. Honestly, it's usually pretty good by default. Another thing you might want to do is plug a color ramp into the specular, into the roughness, if you're trying to get a slightly different result. And you could make this a little more contrast in there, if you're trying to get something a little bit more stylized, or a little bit more dramatic, or if you just want it to look wet. You can move that around. I'm not quite getting that because I think you'll have to turn down the normal a little bit if you want it to look more wet. And you might have to turn up the specularity. Yeah. But you get the idea. You could tweak these settings a lot, but even by default, they look really great. So we're gonna bring in a ground plane, scale that up. We're just gonna really quickly Control A, apply rotation and scale, Tab, U, unwrap that so we have a nice UV map. And if you want to quickly duplicate your nice little shaders, your physically based shaders, you can just come in here. I'll use the tree shader again for this one, and obviously that's completely wrong, but at least you've got all these set up. We'll just hit the plus key so we don't change the tree shader, but then we can come in here, and if you go to wherever you downloaded your ground plane, soil mud is the one that I have, and just start swapping out the textures, makes it a little bit faster. So it's just plug and play at this point, plugging in each of the textures for the ones that we had, roughness, and then finally the normal. And there you go, there's your ground plane. We'll bring it up a little bit so there's that. Now obviously this doesn't look really great because it's super flat, but what you can do, if you wanted to add a bunch of geometry to this really quickly, so subdivide, then you can go in, add your displace modifier, because it comes with a displacement map as well. So you're going to have to add a new texture, go into your texture panel, go to your displace texture, and then open up the texture that's provided. And there's an EXR and a JPEG. I just use the JPEG because it's easier. It's a little bit faster. And this is obviously not quite right. Let's smooth shade that and then go in here. I think we want to change this to UV. That's better, but we could probably pull the strength down to like 0.5, maybe even 0.2. But already it looks a little nicer. And you could add more geometry to make that look better too. But what we're going to do is we're going to just add some more detail. So we'll import, well, let's actually add another plane. Rotate that. I'm just going to isolate this and use one of our materials. And I'm not even naming these right, I'm just going through this really quickly. So obviously you're going to want to make nice names for your new materials so that they're not just all asset wood tree. But I'm going to go in here and unwrap this first. And now I'm going to grab, I actually used probably this plant grass to create some grass dried. Going to albedo. So we've already seen how we did a ground plane and how we do a 3D object, right? And it's super simple. But this is a little bit more, is a little bit different once you start getting into like these atlases is what they call them. So it doesn't look quite right with just the albedo. We're going to start plugging in some more things here. Specularity. Oh, that's the wrong one. Roughness. Normal. And obviously this still doesn't look right because we need to mix it with a transparent shader. So we're going to use a mix shader, add a transparent shader, plug that in, and in order to get that right, we're going to use the opacity map that they provide. And when you plug that into the mix shader, into the factor, I guess we're going to have to swap these around. But there you go. There is your grass. Now, as it is, this does not look that great. If we go into material mode, we can see, first off, we have to rotate this. But you're going to want to cut these out. And I haven't found a super fun way to do this other than just coming in here, tweaking this, and then applying the scale, unwrap again, and you've pretty much got that one, right? You can duplicate this and then come in here, and if you pull up your albedo for the grass, you can move the map over so that it's at the one you want. Move this down, scale it on the X. But as you can see, as you scale it on the X over here, it's distorting it over here. So it's just kind of fiddly. If someone's got a better way of doing this, let me know. I'm sure there's a add-on or a plugin or something you could use. But then what I've done is I'll come over here and then just scale this back to where it was and try and match it up nicely. Origin to geometry. So now we've got a couple little cards here. But point being, pretty quickly, you've got a couple pieces here that when you go into your rendered view, you know, for the most part, that looks pretty nice. Now, it's not going to look great from every angle, and honestly, if you're using a bunch of grass, so if you're like trying to fill this whole area with grass, I would recommend using 3D grass. Now, they do actually have some 3D grass on here, like this. I'll just download that real quick, see if that'll download in time. These are kind of large if you download the high resolution textures, but this is actually completely 3D modeled, and this might be better quality if you're trying to fill up a large space, because what ends up happening, and again, if you guys have a solution for this, let me know. If you've got a bunch of these, Blender has to calculate the opacity, so it has to shoot a transparency ray through here, right? And I'm probably using all the wrong terms, but it's got to try and calculate where this should be invisible, right? This outline right here. And if you have too many of them stacked up, like let's say you had a particle system where it's filling up this whole area, it's got to go through like 100 or 1,000 transparent objects just to get to the end. And so what you end up having to do is you have to end up going to your light paths, and unless you crank up the transparency to like 200 or 300, you end up getting these little black spots where it couldn't get through all the grass because there's too many transparent objects stacked up. So when you hike this light path up a lot, it ends up making your renders take forever. So it's usually a lot better to use 3D modeled grass instead, like something like Andrew Price's Grass Essentials. That's one that I really like a lot. Or they have a lot of 3D photoscanned grass in here as well. So I can actually show you what that looks like. I'll just import that mesh real quick because that's also going to be, you know, 3D. Oh, silly me. I have to extract it first. Okay, now. Oh, and they've got a couple variations of it too, which is nice. So let's just go into the first variation, pull out the LED 0. Okay, here's a fun problem you might run into. Every now and then you'll get an FBX where it says ASC2 FBX files are not supported. What you have to do then is pull open something like Autodesk FBX converter, and this is actually free to download if you just Google it. Pull in the FBX files, and you could do all of them at the same time. I'm just going to do this one to show you, and just convert it to FBX 2013. It's just the wrong type of FBX file, and Blender won't accept it, but it takes like 2 seconds to convert it, and then you can come in here, File, Import. And it'll have a folder with the converted files, FBX 2013, and you can pull that in just fine. So now we have this, which is our new grass. Which looks fantastic. And we'll just pull in another one of these textures, hit the plus sign. And I pulled in this texture because it's already got the opacity set up. And we can just go in real quick to the textures folder. Billboard is a bunch of textures all put onto, so it takes all those variations and puts them on one image, but it reduces the number of images you need, but it's lower resolution. Atlas will just be a separate texture for each variation. So I'm going to use that. Go albedo. Same thing, plug in the specularity, roughness, and normal. And then over here, plug in the opacity. I'm wondering if that looks right. Oh. I think it's upside down. There you go. So actually with this, I take that back. This is probably going to run into the same problem that the other one will, because whenever you have to use an opacity mask, you're going to end up running into that problem where if it has to go through too many transparent objects, you're going to have to hike up the light path, the light paths in your render so high that it almost becomes just ridiculously long to render one frame. So if you're willing to do that, this isn't a bad method, but honestly, most of the time I might recommend using just completely 3D modeled grass, which is going to be more polygons, but honestly that's going to be easier to render than trying to hike up the light path at high enough to make it worth it to use all these transparencies. So pretty quickly you can see, you can put together some cool stuff that just makes, you know, creating nature scenes or organic pieces a lot faster and a lot more fun. I'll be putting out some more videos soon to show you kind of how I use this in my workflow, how I mock out a scene and stuff like that, and I'll be showing you a little bit how I made this scene right here, so you can see what my workflow looks like and how I get into some of the composition and stuff like that, and some of the other organic tools I use, like Blender Guru's Grass Essentials. But if you guys have any questions, drop them in the comments below, and I'll try to answer as many as I can. But until next time.